In our first lecture on this particular theme, we have pointed out that the Chinese Communist Party adopted the program of agrarian revolution. After the 1927 massacre, failure of the autumn harvest uprising, they took shelter in the hills on the Qingkangshan mountain, which was situated on the Hunan-Jiangxi bordering region. And there a number of base areas were set up. Actually, there were 11 red bases were set up there. But the problem was that the leadership of the CPC was opposed to the creation of revolutionary bases. They were in favor of initiating insurrections in the cities. And so they ordered Mao and Chute to attack the cities from the countryside. Initially, Mao did as they were directed, but then after some setbacks, they simply refused to carry out the directives. So there was division as also inconsistency within the CPC policy. That is one thing. Other part was that there were 5 encirclement and suppression campaigns by Chiang Kai-shek's troops. Lakhs of troops encircled the whole area to carry out their kill all, burn all, destroy all operations. And so it gradually became difficult for the CPC, for the Red Army to withstand this particular kind of pressure. Now, it was this which was one of the reasons for undertaking the long march from South China to North China. That was one reason. But there was another important reason. It was a long-term objective. Now, in 1931, China was invaded by Japan, and Manchuria was captured by Japan, and a puppet Manchukuo government was set up at that place. From that place, Japan started to penetrate into other parts of China, and the workers of Shanghai, the people of Shanghai, they resisted. The civilians, as also army men, they resisted. And the workers also set up the Resist Japan and Save China Association. They demanded from the Kuomintang to send troops to fight Japan. And they also said that arms should be supplied to the volunteers in order to fight Japanese aggression. Now, this was the situation. So it became clear to Mao and Chute and others that the center of the revolutionary center had already shifted from South China to Northeast China. So the main forces of the Chinese Red Army, the leadership of the CPC, should migrate from the Qingkangshan mountains to the new theater of war, that is in Shenxi region, Shenxi, Kansu, Ningxia region in Northeast China. So these were the two reasons for undertaking the Long March. In one sense, Long March was one of the greatest exploits in military history. Edgar Snow, in his book Red Star over China, has given a very passionate description of the Long March. It was a journey from South China to Northeast China, across some of the world's most difficult trails, across some of the greatest rivers of Asia, through the country of fierce aborigines, through snow, storm, etc. And on their way, they were pursued by the white armies of 9 provinces, because they proceeded through 9 provinces. And ultimately, in 370 days, they could cover a distance of 7,500 miles. And ultimately, CPC enlarged its base in Northeast China, and they reached Shenxi, where they set up their own new base areas. This long march was a mass migration, no doubt about it. And it was also one of the greatest propaganda tours in history, probably the greatest propaganda tour in history. The Red Army passed through areas which were inhabited by 20 crore people. And in every town they occupied, they called mass meetings, gave theatrical performances, they heavily taxed the rich, freed the slaves, and they preached liberty, equality, and fraternity. And they explained the aims of the agrarian revolution and the need for an anti-Japanese war of resistance. Now, one of the most important developments during the Long March was a conference held at Tsunyi in early January 1935, that is on the way. It was known as the Tsunyi Conference. Tsunyi Conference was very, very important in the history of the communist movement, in the history of modern China, because it was at the Tsunyi Conference that Mao Tse-tung was selected as the chairman of the Communist Party of China. And the whole guidance, how to guide the Long March, that task was entrusted, that was given to him. And he also became the chairman of the Revolutionary Council, head of the Revolutionary Council. At the conference again, the decision was taken to go northward to fight the Japanese and to form a united front. That decision was taken. Now, we have pointed out that Manchuria was captured in 1931 by Japanese aggressors, and Manchukuo puppet government was set up. And from there, they started a general invasion of China. And they started to seize all the major industrial cities, railway towns of North China. In a book named The Rape of Nanking, a scholar Iris Chang, he noted that in December 1937, the Japanese army swept into the ancient city of Nanking, and within weeks, more than 3 lakh people were massacred. 3 lakh people within weeks. Now, Chiang Kai-shek, he adopted a policy of waiting. For him, it was better to have the communists massacred by the Japanese aggressors. He would welcome that rather than himself fighting Japanese aggression. That was Chiang Kai-shek's stand. It was very quite clear. So he adopted a military policy of waiting. Now, since then, the nature of the struggle launched by the CPC changed its character. The concept of the creation of base areas remained. The concept of guerrilla warfare remained. But only difference was that, and there is a fundamental difference, and that is these bases, this Red Army or People's Armies, they were now directed not against the landlords, but against the Japanese aggressors. So from an anti-feudal struggle, it became an anti-imperialist struggle because of the changing situation within China. And a united front was formed with the Kuomintang again. This is the second united front. It was from 1937 to 1945. But it was not very easy to form a second united front with the Kuomintang, because the members of the Communist Party, the members of the Red Army, they suffered a lot in the hands of Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang. And there was a definite opinion within the CPC not to forge a united front with the Kuomintang at all. Now, Mao had to win them over to his idea. A meeting was held, which is known as a Wa Ao Pao Plenum, in December 1935. It was there that Mao put a proposal for the second united front. And Mao's arguments appeared in one of his classic articles on tactics against Japanese imperialism. Now, he pointed out that Japanese aggression inside China had already split up the country. There was a section, even within the Kuomintang, not to speak of other people, who were in favor of carrying on their struggle against Japanese aggression. Since the principal contradiction in Chinese society has changed because of the new situation, there was a need to fight Japan. That need should take precedence over any other need. And the Kuomintang party, according to Mao, would be divided and split up. We should ally not only with all the patriotic people of China, but also with the progressive section, the patriotic section within the Kuomintang. And so we should forge a united front with the Kuomintang. The next question was, how was this anti-Japanese war to be conducted? He wrote 4 essays, very important essays, all of which form part of his military writings. Now, he pointed out that the war against Japan would be fought on the Chinese territory. And since Japan was a small country, it would not be possible for Japan to station forces throughout China. So power vacuums would be created behind enemy lines, behind Japanese lines, and the Red Army, the Communist Party, should take advantage of it, and they should attack the enemy from behind and carry on guerrilla warfare. It was not a positional warfare, but it was a guerrilla warfare depending on the active support of the people. And it would be, the front was a shifting front, indefinite front, not a fixed front at all. And the Japanese armies would be stationed in the cities. They can't control the countryside. And we will, as the situation demanded, according to the demands of the situation, we would attack the Japanese forces, wipe them out, and ultimately we would be able to capture one city after another. Now, these were the arguments which Mao placed before, and ultimately he could win over other members of the party to his idea that a new united front should be forged with the old enemy, that is the Kuomintang. Now, the period from 1937 to 1945 is also known in the history as the Yenan period. Yenan was a place in Shenxi province of China, in northeast China. It was in Yenan that new social experiments were made. Social experiments which were virtually unprecedented in the history of China. It was a model. It was a new model of a future China based on anti-Japanese resistance war. And in fact, for 8 years, anti-Japanese war was carried on by these base areas. And they received the active support of the people, of the peasantry, which of course proved to be crucial for their ultimate victory against Japan. And in the new situation, since anti-Japanese war was the vital need of the time, so agrarian revolution was temporarily suspended, and in its place we have the anti-Japanese, anti-imperialist war or national liberation war. In 1940, Mao wrote an essay entitled On New Democracy. And On New Democracy is regarded as one of Mao's major contributions to Marxism, apart from many other articles also. This new democracy was based on the alliance of 4 revolutionary classes. The peasantry, of course, the working class, the petty bourgeoisie, and the national capitalists, national bourgeoisie. Their aim was to defeat imperialism by fighting the Japanese and also to defeat feudalism. And in the liberated areas, they set up liberated areas through their struggle. And in the liberated areas, local governments were set up on the basis of 3-3-3 principle. The committees, the 9-member committees. So we have 3 communists, 3 members of the center parties, which ultimately took members from KMT, and 3 non-party progressive people. And a time came when that was extended also to patriotic landlords. That the landlords were definitely anti-Japanese, who were willing to fight against Japan. Though, from the social point of view, they were the enemies of the peasants. But since it was a national struggle at that time, so social struggle, anti-feudal struggle, was suspended for the time being. Now, Mao also developed his concept of new democracy. He said that new democratic revolution was a bourgeois democratic revolution, but it was a bourgeois democratic revolution of a new type. It was not like the old type of revolution when the bourgeoisie gave leadership in a revolution. It was a the new democratic revolution is to be led not by the bourgeoisie but by the working class. And Mao also cited some reasons. One, of course, was the division of the world among imperialist powers. So there was no country in the world which was not under the control of some imperialist power or powers. And so the bourgeoisie in those countries got split up into sections, the small, middle, national and the comprador. And the comprador bourgeoisie forges alliance with imperialism, with foreign capital. So it is not possible for the bourgeoisie in a country to give leadership in a revolution which is anti-imperialist. That was one reason. And the second part was, of course, second reason was the October Revolution, because October Revolution, it became clear that the first working class state has emerged. And workers were the class enemies of both of the bourgeoisie as also of indigenous bourgeoisie as also of imperialism. So in such a situation, one cannot expect the bourgeoisie to ally with the working class against imperialism. So Mao said that this is new. This new democratic revolution is new because of the new situation, and it is also to be led not by the bourgeoisie but by the working class. And essentially the new democratic revolution was an agrarian revolution and nothing else. We have one scholar, John G. Gurley. John G. Gurley has pointed out that the period of the anti-Japanese war was not of total retreat for the peasant movement. And in fact, the policy of reduction of rent reduction, reduction in interest, that was still pursued, even when they were in alliance with the landlords. And these struggles definitely helped in reducing the economic power of the landlords in the countryside. And Chesneaux, the French historian Chesneaux, points out that in the countryside, radical changes also took place in the political balance of forces because the poor peasantry, the landless peasantry became more important than the gentry. And when they took up arms against Japan, they knew that they are fighting for a great cause, and they were fighting not for themselves but also for the society.
Why did Mao act according to CPC leadership first and then he refused?
No, Mao knew. Actually, there was a basic difference between Mao and some others on the one hand and the CPC leadership at that time on the other. CPC leadership always believed that there should be urban insurrection, like the Soviet Union, because the Soviet model of revolution was the only model that was there at that time. So they were not in favor of an agrarian revolution. Anyway, now when they set up their base areas, they directed Mao to attack the cities. Initially, as he himself, he had to act according to the leadership, because knowing fully well that their attempts would be defeated and that there would be setbacks. He knew it, and so initially he acted according to that because leadership was saying that. But then when attempts failed, he simply refused to abide by their directions because there is no more necessity to abide by those directives. It was in Yenan that new social experiments were made, which were never attempted before in the previous history of China. The Communist Party or the Red Army had been fighting not only Japan, had been fighting not only Chiang Kai-shek or the Kuomintang, but they had been fighting for a cause, and that was for the creation of a new society. Now, what type of society was the Yenan society? Now, there were many features of the Yenan society. In one sense, it was a military society. Norman Bethune, the Canadian surgeon who went to China, I will come to him later. He said that every year 1,000 battles were fought with the Japanese in 1 year. So it was a military society in which the armed resistance of the people was closely integrated with the everyday life of the people. As for example, land was dug, not only for making tunnels, for military purpose, but also for planting crops, for the purpose of production. Then the Yenan society was a democratic society. In the old society, there was always an opposition between traditional organs of power, civil and military. There was a definite contradiction between the civilians and the military and the army men. Between, in this case, between the party leadership and the common people, basic masses. Now, in Yenan, these differences were consciously reduced to a minimum. The soldiers not only fought, they also tilled the soil. They also took part in the process of production. They lived along with the peasants in the same way, and none of them bore any insignia of rank, military rank, on their dresses. There was a conscious effort on their part to integrate themselves to the people. This was something unthinkable. This was something totally new, unprecedented in the history of China. Now, the same kind of equality was to be found in the relationship between men and women. Women everywhere in ancient China, except for those women who joined the secret societies, women everywhere had been subjected to various forms of subordination, exploitation. They had no rights at all whatsoever in the family. And it was the father, it was the patriarch who took decisions in family affairs, and they had also no property over, no rights over property. Now, in Yenan society, conscious struggles were made against patriarchy. Patriarchy was one of the main targets of attack, which of course was associated with the feudal system. And the women also participated in day-to-day work. They also participated in guerrilla activity. Some of them were also members of the army, regular army. Some of them joined the Red Army on the Long March. There is no doubt about it. And they also formed women's associations to carry forward their own rights, their demands, the cause of women's emancipation. And side by side, a new kind of culture also developed. A culture which was fed by peasant tradition and at the same time integrated with the revolutionary practice. Many people came, many urban people, youth and students, intellectuals, they went to Yenan and to integrate themselves to the peasants. And they, through their writings, they expressed the struggles of the peasants, anti-job struggle, day-to-day struggles of the peasants, struggles for production, their class struggles. These were expressed through their writings. And the peasants were also encouraged to write poems, to perform, to make theatrical performances. So, in this way, a new type of culture developed. New songs, new poems, new operas. Opera was the most important cultural medium in China. One can have a detailed idea about the new culture in one of Mao's essays entitled Tasks at the Yenan Forum on Literature and Art, which was written in May 1942. The Canadian medical mission, with this Canadian medical mission was associated Dr. Norman Bethune. He was a member of the Communist Party of Canada, and the Communist Party of Canada sent Norman Bethune to China. He first went to Spain to fight Franco. He formed part of the International Brigade. People from all parts of the world went to Spain to fight fascist Franco at one point of time. He went to Spain to fight those who make the wounds. That is how he described it. Those who make the wounds with scalpel in his hand. And he was the first to advocate the theory that the medical units should always be very near the front, so that whenever the wounded soldiers are being brought, they could be operated upon and blood transfusion could be given. Then many lives could be saved. It is because that could not be done that many people lost their lives. So he first implemented this in Spain, successfully implemented it. And then after that he came to China. He went to the center of the art in the Utai mountain in the Hubei province of China. the conditions were desperate. In one of his writings to General Nie, he writes, think of it, 2 lakh troops here, 2,500 wounded always in hospital, over 1,000 battles fought in the past year. And to handle all this, no medical supplies, only 5 Chinese graduate doctors, 50 Chinese untrained doctors, and a foreigner, that is himself. This was the situation. There were times when there he worked for almost 2 years. He fought the Japanese, and 18 hours a day. And there were times when he had been operating for 40 hours without any sleep, literally without any sleep, because wounded soldiers were coming in. So he can't sleep, no time to sleep. And when he was operating, he cut his finger. There was no gloves. Without any gloves, he was doing the work. And there was septicemia. There was no sulfur drug to operate himself. So there was delirium and he died. He died of septicemia. Norman Bethune had always been held in high esteem by the Chinese Communist Party, by the people of China. Now, after Norman Bethune's death, Indian medical mission was sent, which included Dr. Kotnis, D.S. Kotnis, besides 4 others. They also went to China to fight against those who make the wounds. Dr. Kotnis, he died in China because of epilepsy, another reason. Apart from Dr. Norman Bethune and Dr. Kotnis, many people, revolutionaries, Ho Chi Minh, people from other countries, many of them went to Yenan to have a first-hand experience of what the Chinese Communist Party had been doing. We have dealt with the causes behind the Long March, why at all the Long March was undertaken by Mao and the Communist Party. Then the formation of the United Front against Japan after Japanese aggression to China. Then we have the Yenan phase where new social experiments were made. We have briefly dealt with the concept of the new democracy, and we have also referred to the Yenan Society and medical missions from Canada and from India.